we're connected, it means we all believe in each other. And I believe that you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. So do it.
I realized that I had a purpose, and it wasn't just about me.
Together we can show the world how awesome it is to support one another and build women up.
There is nothing more powerful than a group of determined sisters.
I can't keep quiet.
Let us fight with love.
When somebody underestimated me, it made me want to prove them wrong.
You know what? Perfection isn't real.
You are great. Don't worry about what anybody else thinks of you.
So many people around the world have a very negative idea of what Muslim women are like. It's pretty simple. We're awesome.
I'm not a lone voice. I am many. I am Malala. But I'm also Shazia. I'm Kainat. I'm Kainat Somro. I'm Mozoon. I am Amina. And today, I'm not raising my voice. It is the voice of those 66 million girls.
I can't keep quiet.
Greetings, my sisters, brothers, family, and friends from around the world. On behalf of the Inglewood, Pacific, California chapter of the Links Incorporated, the International Trends and Services, we welcome you to the national stage, the international stage where we salute, celebrate, and pay homage to women and their achievements. True to our theme, Rock the Red, Worldwide Women Taking a Stance, our International Women's Day observance will take a look at the intersectionality of health disparities that disproportionately impact African American and women around the globe. They will also have an opportunity this evening to level up and support each other. As countries and communities start to slowly recover from the devastating pandemic, while on this global stage, we will in concert, consciously raise our voices in support of ending exclusion and marginalization of women. Each of us will choose to challenge. This year's International Women's Day observance is taking time out of our schedule so that we can raise our voices and support each other about the global pandemics that's impacting our communities. As women, we must build solidarity by challenging the historic injustices and by promoting our rights and restoring our dignity. As women of the world, we want and we deserve equal future, free from stigma, free from stereotype, free from violence, peaceful world. We want to work in a world that is loving and supporting of all. Our struggle as women for equality is not just a struggle of our own. It's not a struggle of one community. It is a struggle of everyone who has a passion for humanity. Every day, throughout our actions, in every way we lead, in every way we talk, in every way we act, we challenge norms. We transform habits. We change the laws, we take action, we inspire others to create a world that's inclusive. We will not stop. We will continue to choose to challenge. We will collectively work together to make sure that the world is inclusive. We realize that we cannot do this alone. We must do this in partnership. Tonight, I have the distinct honor to really work with an individual whose passion, his purpose is transforming communities. Amara Canada. I'm just very delighted to share this global stage with you. Amara Canada is the National Director of Communications and Community Engagement for AIDS Healthcare Foundation. He is also the Director of Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition. Welcome to the global stage, Amara.
Thank you so much, Dr. David. As always, it is wonderful to share this global stage with you and the sisterhood of the Links Incorporated, and specifically our sisters in the IPC chapter. On behalf of AIDS Healthcare Foundation and our over 6,500 employees across the globe, our president and CEO, Michael Weinstein, and our board of directors, I want to just give greetings and say how honored we are to once again be in partnership with our sisters at the IPC chapter of the Links Incorporated to bring together the sisterhood and a few good righteous brothers to elevate and uplift some important messaging. As we know, month is a time period where we pause to give honor and salute and elevate the impact, the empowerment, and the work of women across the globe. And that is why, as we kick into this specific month that we refer to as Women's Herstory Month, that we have this important and critical conversation, recognizing the intersectionality and the interconnectivity of the impact, the disproportionate impact of health disparities across this globe impacting Black women. We have two amazing panelists, an amazing moderator that will guide what we like to call a community discussion as worldwide women come together to take a stance. We have witnessed, particularly in our country, and I'm based here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I would say with a high emphasis on states across the South, the impact and the power of Black women's vote. And now we must not stop at the ballot, but take that power to elevate and to encourage and to support Black women across this globe in the true spirit of sisterhood to take back control of their lives and their bodies. And the first way of doing that is to take control of their health. So we are very excited about this conversation. And again, as I've shared, it is a community conversation that is not just to stop and talk about the issues, but to guide us towards a collective call to action of what all of the sisters across this globe together can do to make a difference in the lives and the health of the sisterhood. And I put the charge to our brothers to say, we brothers, we must stand ready to support our sisters in the work that they are doing, because when the sisterhood wins and is elevated, all of humanity wins and is elevated. So with that, it is my honor to introduce a dear sister friend, a longtime friend, an award-winning journalist who has a very impressive career, having been at the Associated Press, the Washington Post, the LA Times, the Orlando Sun-Sentinel, and now currently serving as one of the founders and editor-at-large of the 19th, an independent newsroom reporting the intersection of gender, politics, and policy, as well as an MSNBC contributor, my dear sister friend, Erin Haynes.
Listen, thank you so much, Dr. Day and Amara. It truly does take a village, and I'm really thrilled to be joining both of you and everyone today on the global stage. So hello, everyone. Welcome to Rock the Red, Worldwide Women Taking a Stance. I'm Erin Haynes, again, editor-at-large at the 19th. Where we really absolutely understand that healthcare is political and that policy can determine the outcome for so many. So I encourage all of you watching to learn more about our work at 19thnews.org. And on behalf of myself, today's featured guests, the Links Incorporated, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and the Black Leadership AIDS Crisis Coalition, thank you for joining us today as we virtually mark International Women's Herstory Month. I cannot imagine a better way to kick this month off. Obviously, we're celebrating Women's Herstory Month, but we are also being honest and telling the truth about the realities facing women, particularly Black women and girls today. And so this community dialogue is really going to look at the intersectionality of health disparities that disproportionately impact Black women and girls across the globe, and ways that Black women can rise to new levels to support each other, minus the physical borders that may exist, right? I think we've all kind of learned about that in this pandemic, to work together to address the impact that they can have. So in the context of this conversation, we're going to explore how race, gender, and socioeconomic status contribute to the elevation of these disparities across the globe. And the dialogue is going to conclude with tangible items that Black women can enact that will really shift the trajectory of health disparities impacting Black women and girls, because we know, right, that when confronted with crisis, Black women respond with action. And so while we wish we were hosting this event in person, there's really no reason why we can't make this as interactive as possible. So please don't hesitate to submit your questions using the Q&A button, and we will do our best to address them throughout today's conversation. So with that, I am pleased to welcome our featured experts for today. First, we have Dr. Michel Duvivier Pierre Louis, who is in September 2008 became Prime Minister of Haiti. And while Prime Minister, Pierre Louis also served as Minister of Justice and Public Security. Upon leaving office in November 2009, Pierre Louis resumed her activities at the Open Society Foundations, Haiti. She created in 1995 under the name Fondation Connaissance et Liberté, also known as FOCAL. She is now FOCAL's president, coordinating special projects in sustainable development, higher education, and national heritage, with an emphasis on human rights and gender justice. She was invited to join the Open Society Foundation's Women's Rights Programs Advisory Board in 2015, and since 2018, she has served as board chair. Pierre Louis is also a professor at Université Quisqueya, Haiti. In 2010, President Zapatero of Spain nominated her as a member of the International Commission Against the Death Penalty based in Spain. In 2014, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon nominated her as a member of a high-level panel on a technology bank for the least developed countries. In 2017, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres nominated her as a member of high-level advisory board on mediation. The former prime minister is a member and administrator of a review, Chemin Critique, in which she wrote several articles along with other Haitian and Caribbean writers on politics, gender issues, economics, arts, and culture. She has also contributed to several books and reviews. In November 2020, as a member of the Council of Women World Leaders, she received the Women Political Leaders Trailblazer Award at the Reykjavik Global Forum Women's Leader 2020. Welcome, Dr. Pierre Louis.
Thank you so much, Erin, for this really nice introductory words. I don't know if I deserve all this, but thank you so much.
Oh, you absolutely deserve it because you've absolutely earned every word of that. And so next, with that, I want to bring on Dr. Penny Ayutang, AHF African Bureau Chief. Dr. Ayutang is a public health practitioner who is responsible for providing strategic leadership and health systems management of AHF's programs in 13 African countries. She has over 16 years of experience gained by working within integrated national public-private partnerships, including civil society and communities. Her experience encompasses managing comprehensive HIV/AIDS and ART programs with good understanding of national and international issues regarding HIV/AIDS, starting up an expansion of programs through development of strategic complementary partnerships and collaboration at international, national, and community levels. Before becoming AHF's Bureau Chief for Africa, she was the Bureau Chief for the East-West Africa region, where she oversaw operations in 5 countries and was the country program director for the AHF Uganda Cares program. Her efforts as a country program director for AHF Uganda Cares helped to build a large HIV prevention, care, and treatment program. Prior to her appointment as country director, she was the national medical director for AHF Uganda Cares, overseeing programs in 11 health facilities, and medical officer in charge for AHF Uganda Cares Masaka Healthcare Center, where she provided care for over 4,000 HIV patients. In her earlier roles, she worked as a medical officer at Verica Mission Hospital in Fort Portal. Ayutang is a member of the National Policy Committee on HIV/AIDS and Antiretroviral Therapy. Dr. Ayutang's current role includes providing oversight for programs in 13 African countries, including Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, South Africa, Zambia, Eswatini, Lesotho, Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe. Dr. Ayutang has a Master of Science in Infectious Diseases from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and received a bachelor's degree in Human Medicine and Surgery from the Embarras University of Science and Technology. And around here, she is affectionately known as Dr. Penny. Welcome, Dr. Penny.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Erin. I'm glad to be here to join in this conversation.
Well, I'm really grateful to have both of you. So thank you so much for being here. And let's just dive right in. I want to start, we're preparing obviously to mark International Women's Day, which is on Monday, March the 8th. I want to ask both of you what you see as the most urgent health crisis impacting both Black women and Black girls today. And why aren't these issues getting more attention? Prime Minister, let's start with you.
It is true that the COVID pandemic reached our shores, but for reasons that still need to be researched and analyzed, the death toll is far from having reached the expected catastrophic heights that it has in Europe or even the United States. But you see, I like when I have to speak about Haiti, and I always take the time to explain our singular situation. You see, Haiti is the first country to be founded upon clearly stated anti-colonial, anti-slavery, anti-racist principles. The first, indeed, to affirm that Black lives matter.
Yes.
Yet, Haiti has always been and still is discriminated against. We're talking about intersectionality. We are a case in point. We are discriminated against regionally and worldwide as a result of our complex history. Shunned by superpowers, made to pay through boycotts, extortions, and designated as the bad example for all would-be emancipation struggle, including the US southern states. And at the same time, racially and economically motivated injustice towards the majority of Haitians inside the country has resulted from a complex and discriminatory social structure inherited from a colonial order based on skin color, economic class, and male-dominant superstructure. In this majority, women, especially women living in rural areas, pay the highest price. Gender-based inequalities continue to keep women in very weak social and political position. I know I've been through that. And of constant violation of their rights and of their well-being. So, I was very pleased to hear Amara talk about HIV. I'll give you an example. You probably remember the way Haiti and Haitians were stigmatized when the AIDS epidemic appeared.
Yes.
The US Center for Disease Control called it the 4H disease, and one of the H were Haitians. It took 100,000 Haitians blocking the Brooklyn Bridge in Manhattan for the CDC to remove the stigma. But the damage was done. Yet, and I'm glad Dr. Penny is a specialist on this issue, years later, until today, Haiti became a model for the treatment and prevention of HIV/AIDS, thanks to the dedication of women, mostly, of our women doctors and allies, of our population, and of course, of funding that we got from the Global Fund and PEPFAR. So you see, even today, with the COVID-19 has probably exacerbated existing inequalities. And this is probably more acute in the Haitian diaspora, as a matter of fact, who support their families through remittances. Lots of people died. I heard even in southern Florida, last week, 25 people died, and among them women. But health disparities pre-existed COVID-19 and are a consequence of Haiti has been and still is treated internationally. And women issues are of the utmost importance. I'll have probably time to talk more about, because Haiti was the first in the region to have created a women's rights organization in 1929 under US military occupation of the country. And these women were fighting for voting rights and their political participation as full-fledged citizens. But they also launched a campaign against rape and sexual violence perpetrated by the US soldiers on Haitian girls and women. A long history where women's bodies are treated as battleground, and when it comes to Black women like us, we have to face the double physical stigma in our bodies, being a woman and being Black. So the International Women's Day is a very special time for all of us in Haiti, in Africa, in the US, and throughout the world to bring our voice to the utmost higher level that we can, so that our voice can be heard, so that in solidarity we embrace the movement in Haiti, in the diaspora, in other countries, and we learn from each other and coalesce forces to change the world. There is no justice without women's voice. There is no fight against inequalities and disparities without women's struggle. So thank you for having given me the opportunity to explain my own standpoint in my own country, but how we are willing for this solidarity and embracing together this long fight for women's rights and gender justice.
Oh, Madam, that was so well put, and I knew that you were not going to come here without bringing the entire nation of Haiti into this global forum with you. And so I welcome the opportunity to hear, for you to educate all of us really about your country and its legacy and what Haiti still has left to contribute to the world, and what we need to be contributing and what we need to be paying attention to. Dr. Penny, I want to turn to you on this about what you see as we head into International Women's Day is the challenges on the continent facing Black women and girls right now.
Thank you very much, Erin, and greetings from Kampala, Uganda. It's early in the morning. It's coming to 4:30 a.m. But I couldn't miss this opportunity to have this dialogue because it's very important. It was very good to hear from Michelle because at the end of the day, women's voice is lacking in so many of the areas that we operate in, not just in health, but it's in the politics, it's in the economy. All those factors at the end of the day have over the years affected women's health and women's ability to stand up for themselves. So much as we are marking the International Women's Day today, I think it should not be just about one day. More and more, we need to elevate women's voices in each and every forum, whether it's the political forum, whether it's education, whether it's the economy, because women have been left behind. Women have been left behind, and the social injustices in all those areas at the end of the day contribute to women's poor health. When we are talking about a crisis of health, at this point in time, most people are talking about the COVID pandemic. Yes, it's affected us across the globe. Africa at the end of the day came more or less at the tail end of the first infections being reported. And as we mark 1 year of the pandemic today, we see that much as the predictions were very gloom for Africa, predictions were very gloom. People were saying they'll see bodies on the streets. Africa will not be able to cope. The health system is very fragile. At the end of the day, though, much as we know that there are very many challenges regarding testing, not as many people are getting tested, there have been not as many cases as were expected. Across Africa now, it's just about 1.5 million people. Just over 1.5 who have tested positive for COVID. But that said, when I compare the 1.5 million against the backdrop of our biggest crisis, and that's the HIV and AIDS pandemic for us, we want to ensure that the HIV pandemic is not forgotten in Africa, because the Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, that's about 48 countries, carries the biggest burden of the AIDS pandemic, and that's about 60% of the AIDS pandemic. The numbers come from Africa, over 25 million people. And of those 25 million, women are most disproportionately affected for various reasons. One of them is really to do with economics. Economically, most women are not empowered in Africa. They depend on their spouses, on their partners to live on a day-to-day basis. And that alone has been disempowering over the years. Right now, in Africa, we face a situation where the face of the new epidemic is actually young women and girls. This is young women and girls between the age of 14 to 25 years. And these women are and now and this should be the next generation that takes care of of the growth and development of the region, but these women are disproportionately affected, and one of the main reasons is that economically they're disempowered, so they are depending on older men to get by. They're depending on older men for things as basic as buying sanitary pads. I'm not so certain as to how many people know about period poverty, but it's really the reality in Africa. You find that girls are missing up to 40 days of their school year because they do not have sanitary pads. So they stay home because they can't afford to go to school. During their periods, they need sanitary pads, as basic as that. And you find that men, some are actually young girls who are supposed to go to school, are sleeping with men just so that they can get sanitary pads. Some end up sleeping with older men just because they need money to take care of the families. Their parents have died, and they're the head. The head of the household, and they need to take care of the household. So for us, the AIDS pandemic continues to ravage across Africa. Women in each and every cycle every 10 years continue to be the face and take up the brunt of the infection. And it's not just those who are affected, those who are infected. It's also those who are affected by HIV and AIDS. It's the young women and girls who become heads of households because their parents have died. It's young women and girls who are now, orphans and need to take care of themselves. But then, we don't have a communal system that, is able to catch them along the way. So it's many of those aspects. And still, we are so dependent on the West to support the HIV and AIDS fight in Africa. So one of the key things is that have really led to these disparities is that on the political agenda, you find that much as in the last 20 years, there's been a little more political inclusivity of women. You find that in a few countries like Rwanda, 60% of the female representatives who are members of parliament. There have been special members of parliamentarian positions placed for women. There are women, ministries of gender and women. These are supposed to take care of women's business.
Yeah.
However, much as women have tried overall to bring key issues that affect women like HIV and AIDS on the political agenda and to affect policy, not much has been gained as yet. So at this point in time, we are still battling with the HIV pandemic as our biggest crisis. And then on top of that, a year ago, we have the COVID pandemic, which has now placed women at a much more vulnerable position. And with COVID, we know what it's been characterized by. Closure of businesses, closure of schools, closure, of basically lockdowns have closed everything up, especially during the first wave. And that has had the net effect. For instance, when we talk about closure of businesses and stay home orders, it's meant that women and young girls and young women are spending more time in the home. And from a number of reports, it's led to a lot of vulnerabilities. One, gender-based violence has actually gone up. We've seen that rape has gone up. Early marriages have gone up. And most of the early marriages have gone up in some communities, mainly because parents of all of a sudden were very poor. They couldn't even afford food. And they married off this young girl so that they could just get some money to get by. We've seen, there's been a lot more exploitation of the girl child for child labor, just so that parents need to get by and get money. So it's really increased their vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
And on the education front, we know that an empowered woman who is educated will make better choices for her health. On the education front, it's estimated that about 11 million girls who will drop out of school because of school closures, so they will never get back. So all these disparities, at the end of the day, we don't know what all the effects have been at this point, apart from some of the clear ones like gender-based violence has gone up. But a few years down the line, it's going to have a major impact on women, and these are some of the things that we need to fight.
Yeah, what both of you are saying is so important about the other intersectional issues that are impacting the health outcomes for Black women and girls. And so I think it's so important that you highlight that you highlight both of those. Dr. Penny, you do bring up the pandemic, and because we are also approaching this week the 1-year anniversary of the WHO's declaration of the COVID-19 crisis as a global pandemic. I do want to ask you both kind of about that. Dr. Penny, you talked a little bit already about COVID on the continent. Madam Prime Minister, I want to ask you, what the COVID-19 crisis has meant in Haiti, especially in terms of Black women and girls, and if the response has been equitable in terms of gender, in terms of class, what you're seeing.
Yeah, as I said earlier, the COVID-19 pandemic has reached our shores, but it's very strange because the death toll, people die, people get, and until today, I tried, because I know I was going to talk about that today, I tried to have data about, do we have the vaccine in Haiti? Nobody could tell me if the vaccines are here today.
Okay.
But I must tell you that even though people died and continue to die, nothing compared to what happened even in the DR, our neighbor, the Dominican Republic. Very few people in Haiti wear masks. The majority of poor women have to go out daily to earn a living, often in densely populated open marketplaces. So social distancing is impossible. And it is true that the pandemic has exacerbated the existing inequalities, and you can see it in health, of course, in education. How do you want poor people to send their kids, to have their kids have computers, internet connections, to learn from a distance? It's impossible. Mm-hmm. So this has created more disparities, more inequalities in countries where we still have to fight with basic inequalities. Dr. Penny gave a few statistics, in Haiti, from very recent data collected by UNFPA and other medical and population institutions, 61% of pregnant women do not deliver their children in a hospital or in a decent health center with qualified personnel because they don't have access. Mm-hmm. Access is a big, big issue. They deliver at home with the assistance of poorly trained midwives, and as a consequence, the child mortality rate is the highest in the continent. 530 deaths for 100,000 births, the highest. In the DR, it's half of that. It's 235. In the past 5 years, 57 of new births were unwanted. And 40% of women have access, only 40% of women have access to contraceptives. But it is also linked to policies that come from the US. USAID at one point, you could not have access to anything because primary care and reproductive rights were forbidden in their program. So anything that was started before that stopped, So this is a very, very big issue for us. 20% of girls under 18 have already given birth. And children are born in poverty, in destitute neighborhoods, from single parent homes led by mother. So these are really big issues that we have to deal with, whether it comes about health issues, education, even enfranchisement. How do we disenfranchise so that they become full-fledged citizens that can participate? And the other issue also is that the level of poverty that we face and the lack of access remain through time, in spite of huge amounts of money wasted by the donor community. The donor community that is mostly concerned with its own reproduction rather than with the emancipation of women and of a population desperate to get out of the poverty trap. So the COVID-19 really, we're still wondering if we're going to get hit harder. Some analysts said that it's because Haiti, as usual, is being isolated. Haiti has a very young population.
Okay.
65% of the population is between 15 and 35.
Wow.
And since we live outdoors, are those conditions, an impediment for the spread of the disease? We are analyzing those issues, but we are fortunate because if we were hit as hard as the US or other countries, even in the Caribbean, that would have been devastating.
Yes.
Fortunately, we still can hold on what we have now, try to, I myself get involved in a lot of advocacy campaign, trying to really explain the thing, because we are in such a difficult political situation now, and there is such a disconnect between the government and the population that there is a confidence and trust issue also. How do we trust people whom we don't feel we have anything in common with? So these are issues we have to deal with, and again, women pay the highest price. But that doesn't mean that there is no resistance. That doesn't mean there is not a constant fight by women for women's rights.
Yes.
And the feminist organizations and the Haitian women's organizations have really picked up from where the pioneers left. And we fought under dictatorship. We're still fighting in very difficult situations today. And a long way to go, but quite a few gains occur no matter what. Mostly in the successful advocacy campaign to change the legal framework that discriminates against women. The feminist organization were able to change the law on rape. Rape was a crime of honor, but in the honor of the man. We changed, rape is a crime today in Haiti. That was a big victory. Big victory to have Parliament pass, the international or the regional convention for against violence against women. And these were big victories. There's still a lot to be done, but the feminists have been extremely active, extremely prominent, and in spite of what we feel sometimes as being isolated, and maybe this forum like this should be a way for us, not only that our voice is heard, but there is some kind of solidarity movement that can spring from this type of forum, so that sometimes we feel less isolated than we are in general. Haiti, people don't count on Haiti. Yet, as you said, Erin, there's so much that we can tell the world about our resistance, about our fights, and that continues until today. And there is an emerging feminist movement, and our hopes is that they continue the fight, that they embrace the solidarity movements from the diaspora and from other countries, so that we learn from each other and coalesce our forces to change the world with our dignity and with what we can bring to the world.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, listen, what you are saying, both of you, the misconceptions and frankly misinformation and such a heavy focus on this pandemic globally has overshadowed some of these health priorities in the countries, that both of you are doing work in. And we know, both of you know that the work is happening, the work is being done, right? And yet, folks, not enough folks know about what that work is and what the need is, right? And so I think that you have really transitioned perfectly into the call to action, because a lot of folks that are tuning into this broadcast right now may want to know, now that you're helping them to become more aware of what the situation is, how they can get involved. So I want to turn to both of you and ask you about that now. What are some of the next steps for you that you are doing regarding combating some of these health disparities among women and girls, and how can people help? Dr. Penny, I'm going to start with you and then come back to Madam Prime Minister.
Thank you, Erin. I just want to comment that I like the resilience of the Haitian people.
Amen.
They remind they remind me of the Zimbabweans, very resilient. Yes. Yeah. So one of the key things in which we can make change is if we are at the policy table. In listening to Michelle and just hearing how movement of women ensured that there was change in terms of legislation against gender-based violence. That's what we need. So the number one thing is women can make a difference if we are able to influence policy. We cannot wait for this to be the docket of men only. In most of the situations, we find that in majority, let's say in majority of the lead organizations, whether it's international bodies, whether it's the political bodies, it's mostly men it's mostly male dominated. We need to step up. And the ways that we can step up is really, one is to come together for a common good, identify what is cross-cutting. In listening to Michelle, and I was just thinking about it as well for Africa, gender-based violence, for instance, is common across the board.
Yes.
And it leads to further disparity and injustices against women, affecting them in all avenues. So as a call to action, one of the ways we can make sure that we can stop something like gender-based violence is to ensure that this becomes a policy and becomes legislation in each and every country that we operate in. And we can have collective action towards that. I would say, for instance, when it comes to the US folks, they have the opportunity to influence Congress. We know that the US government, through its development fund, has a lot of influence in the countries that they operate in, because they fund a number of organizations that actually could support these legal frameworks. So it can actually start at that point, where in the US, legislation that is against violence against women is supported, and through that mechanism, Congress actually has a lot of influence within the countries, at least for Africa. I know they do, and in a number of other countries. So that's one of the ways that we can collectively act together. So you do your part in the US, we in Africa as well will hold our people and our politicians accountable and continue to push for such legislation to take place. So policy is the number one area I'll talk about. The next one is education. I keep going back to education because we know that education of a woman makes a big difference in the choices that she makes. When she's empowered, she makes a big difference. So one of the things we are doing, for instance, as AHF, we have what we call the Girls Act program, and it's basically trying to address those barriers, that stand in the way of girls getting educated. I talked about something as simple as period poverty. Not many people know that that's an issue, and yet it's an issue that affects multitudes of girls across the continent. Africa, like Haiti, has a very young population. 70% of our population is actually below the age of 25, below the age of 25, yes. And we think maybe that's one of the reasons that has protected Africa against having the more severe effects of COVID. So education of the girl child makes a big difference, in the choices that they will make and the health outcomes you may have, down the line. So ensuring that, all countries, I know in a number of African countries, education is actually free in the lower stages, or we call it the primary stages. But when it comes to the tertiary level, education becomes paid for, and most girls actually end up dropping out of school, because in most cultures in Africa, the boy child is favored over the girl child. So there are things like that. When it's legislation and girls are encouraged to achieve and attain education to the highest level and supported by governments, most governments can actually either subsidize the education or create regulations that allow the girl child to be able to get into higher level of institutions. So that equally is one of the areas that we can, address collectively. The other one I'll say is that we need to start supporting women's organizations better. The multitudes of women's organizations that are operating out there, but they may, for one reason or the other, maybe because they're not as well funded, or they don't have the right structure in place, they do not get as much funding to make a difference in what they're doing. And most of them are actually at community level. So supporting those women's organizations, identifying what they're actually addressing, and ensuring that they can be the voice of change right from the community level will make part of the difference. And the other aspect, which I think we've not dealt on a lot, is economic empowerment. We know that the lack of money, poverty itself, unemployment is a big barrier towards achieving health. So in multiple countries, there are models, and we could learn from each other. There are models that actually support microfinance, and it's little money. It's sometimes as low as $50 a month. With the $50, you find that women are more able to multiply that, put it in their small business, whether it's a market stall, and be able to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining, and actually support the whole family. So being able to find those drivers and models that women can use to empower themselves economically will make a bigger difference down the chain. And those are some of the models we can learn from each other and borrow from each other and actually implement. So I want to keep it at that for now.
Absolutely. Madam Prime Minister, is there anything you would want to add to that in terms of how folks who may be watching this, who say, thank you for telling me about the situation in Haiti, I want to get involved, what can I do? Is it calling your congressperson and getting them to be more involved with Haiti? Is it them donating direct resources to folks in Haiti? Is it connecting with organizations on the ground, like Dr. Penny was saying? Or is it all of those things?
Absolutely, it is all of those things. And what Dr. Penny said is so true. The feminist organization really worked very hard about changing the legislation. And there's been some victories, even though most of the parliament members were men.
Right.
But still, there was strong fight and successes along those lines. Education, because it is true that violence against women, gender-based violence, just like Dr. Penny said, here, just like abroad, it's a public health and public safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that can be done across the board, sharing experiences, sharing, training for young girls, women, and overcoming the barriers that exist, in language or what have you. And excuse my English because that's not my native language.
Well,
but
your English is beautiful. Please continue.
Anything that can be shared on education. But what you said, Erin, you see, we have a very large diaspora in the U.S. And the foundation of which I'm the president, we are really working now with the diaspora in Miami, in North, because it's the largest. It's even larger than in New York. And now there are a few elected Haitian Americans. And I think working with them to raise their voice and have some kind of influence on the policies that are applied towards Haiti would be extremely important and productive with regard to the way we are treated in general by the international community, but mostly by the US. So any kind of campaign, advocacy, work that can be done together with that diaspora, that is trying also to organize better so that there is less disparities among them also. And they are women-led in general. They are women-led. And anything that can be done along those lines to influence policies and make sure that there is that takes into account, what is going on in Haiti and what can be done to fight those inequalities in Haiti would be tremendous help. You see, in Haiti, most homes are women-led. Most homes are women-led. And people don't particularly get married, except that now there is a huge influence of fundamental religion in Haiti coming from the US. And that has a very negative effect on our culture and on a lot of things that have to do with the way those religions, these fundamentalist religions, target women. They target homosexuals. They target, any kind of gender is the major enemy.
I see.
And I know that in Africa that has happened a lot also.
Yeah.
But we are swarmed by those, and it's also a big issue that should be taken into account.
Well, I want to ask you both one more thing before we open it up to the audience for questions. And just to remind you all, if you do have questions, please do submit them, because we are going through them as we speak, and we're going to try to get to as many as we possibly can in just a few minutes. But I mean, Madam Prime Minister, you bring up such a great point about, well, both of you actually, about the value of women's leadership, especially women's political leadership, and the lack of that, in the places where you are attempting to do that work. And so, Dr. Penny, I want to come first to you and ask about, making the case for women's leadership, especially political leadership, and what some of the barriers are to that on the continent, and how we can help with folks who, maybe are wanting to get women that are wanting to get more politically involved, but there are barriers to them doing that.
Yeah, I think what we need to start is with the existing forums. I know that across Africa, there is a forum for women parliamentarians, but you wonder in that forum whether they go out of their way to actually encourage more female leadership. So I think one is by starting with existing forums, which, the political forums that are already in leadership. Secondly, would be to learn from other countries. I will give the example of Rwanda again. Rwanda and Uganda, actually, it's just one of those countries where there has been a very dedicated effort by the leadership to ensure that women are actually encouraged to lead in the political realm. And so creating special, and I wouldn't even say special, because it really has to be, it's our right to be in leadership. So ensuring that women are have the ability to be leaders by creating women's constituencies, women representation at different constituencies. So that has happened in Uganda, where each constituency actually has a women's member of parliament. So whether there is a male one or a female one, there is always one that is meant for the women. And women still also have the right to compete with their male counterparts for just for the regular member of parliament, to be a regular member of parliament. So one is using the existing structure, but also, still it goes back to ensuring that the women's empowerment movement can actually be reinvigorated. I think that started with the Beijing conference, and it had a storm across Africa. It actually had a very big storm across Africa. Yes. And I think similar international forums which actually encourage leadership of women and demand for that leadership and inclusion in the political circles can actually go a long way. So I think a number of countries can actually learn from each other and borrow from each other. And so it's still the onus is on us, the women, to demand to be in that space. And I think that at this point in time, especially in our continent, that opportunity is there.
Yeah. Madam Prime Minister, you were only the second woman to be Prime Minister of Haiti. Talk about what that meant for you to bring your gender, to bring your lived experience as a woman to that role. What were the kinds of things that you had in mind that maybe someone who was in charge of the country was not thinking about, who was a man?
It was a very difficult process. Being a woman, it was a very difficult process. And the issue, it is true that it's extremely important to encourage women to be in politics and to be elected, even at the local level. But they shouldn't be just tokens.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you cannot come alone in a structure that for a long time has been managed by men, is continuously managed by men, with a very patriarchal ideology and structure, and you think that you can bring change. So it's a very difficult experience, because your power, in fact, even if you have the best ideas, even if you are honest, even if you really want to make change, the obstacles are so many and so direct or indirect, that at the end of the day you feel extremely frustrated. So you cannot do that alone. You would have to have a commando of women that take power and that can really, with the same values, with the same ideas of emancipation, with the same sense of dignity, you can carry out the change that are necessary for the emancipation of women and fighting inequalities and disparities. So it's, I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Yes. So I just wanted to add to that. You bring up something very important that maybe we've left out of this discussion, the aspect of engaging the men, because I think sometimes as women we struggle on our own with all the advocacy. We push a lot on our own, but we find that there are men who are actually willing and open to encourage women to be in this position. So the aspect of encouraging positive masculinity from a young age, it has to start when the men are still young. It's harder to change them when they're older, but from a young age, ensuring that they understand and support the values that actually will help women to rise up above all these injustices is very important. So bringing in the men and helping them understand what is key and important for women is also very important.
At the political level, there's been a big change in the last elections we had at the local level. There are lots of women who were elected as mayor, at that level, mayor or local government, but at the same time, they created an association, they invited me to their meetings. But at the same time, you can feel all the obstacles I was talking about, and the way sometimes they are frustrated for the lack of real power that they have to engage in their communities. So it's going to be a long fight, but it's a necessary fight, because it is true that at the policy level, at the educational level, things have to change. In Haiti, there are more girls going to school. But what Dr. Penny said about even when they have their periods, the difficulty that you have to face that in a school where nothing is being taken care of that at the school itself for the girls. So even though there's been a gain, there's still so much more to be done in the curriculum, in the way we teach to girls, so that they can go to secondary school and then at the university. I teach at the university and I can see the disparity also. So it's a long fight, but we need support for that.
Right.
I was thinking at one point something which might be a bit utopian. I was invited by President Zapatero to be a member of a commission against the death penalty. And we've been fighting for the past 10 years for the abolition of capital punishment. Maybe we should have an international commission for the fight against, gender-based violence. You see what I mean? I mean, violence against women and gender-based violence, I'm telling you, it's a major public health and public safety issue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, this has been fantastic, and I obviously could talk to both of you all night, but I want to get to some of these great questions that we have coming in from the audience, and so I'm going to start here with the first question. This is going to be to both of you, and I think you've kind of spoken kind of broadly about this, but if you could just elaborate on the role that women play. You talked about women being, kind of the breadwinners and primary, head of household a lot of times in homes. What role do women play in elevating the importance of health and wellness in their families? Dr. Penny, let's start with you.
Yeah. I think most of us know that, usually your first teacher tends to be your mother, on every front. And for girls specifically, in an African context, so girls, when someone, for instance, is talking about educating you about your period, it's never going to be your father. It's always going to be your mother. So in most of the situations, one is women take the lead when it comes to health issues in the family. It's not just caring for their families, but it's also ensuring that everything around the family, whether it's knowledge about particular disease conditions, most of that tends to come from the mother. So mothers usually will take care of the household in that regard as well. And then the reality also on the economic front, in most situations you find that women on behalf of their families have better, I'll not say just on behalf of their families, generally in Africa, women have better health seeking practices compared to men. A woman will have, a minor illness and go to the health facility a lot faster and earlier compared to the men. I do remember when I was at the beginning of the pandemic in Africa, for the HIV pandemic specifically, I would see that men would come in a lot more sick with HIV compared to the women. Women will come in when they have, they've seen a few symptoms and signs here, but men will come in stage 3, stage 4. Some too ill, extremely ill. That's when they come in. So women usually take the lead when it comes to ensuring that their families are safe and healthy. So women do play a very major role in regards to the safety and the health of their families. They take the lead on that front.
Yeah. Well, let me ask another one then. This one is also, I'll take this, stay with you for a second, Dr. Penny, because this is a question about AHF. Considering the issues of gender and power that contribute to the HIV/AIDS pandemic, what are organizations like AHF and governments doing differently to really ensure that the gender inequality issues that underpin HIV/AIDS are being addressed through programs and policies?
Yeah. So I will start with the last part. I think most of you know that AHF, one of our strong arms of AHF is the advocacy. The advocacy has taken us a long way as an organization, apart from just the programs. So the number one key area that we've been advocating for, issues to do with women and girls, the gender issues specifically, is to advocate. And what are we advocating for? Number one, it's been the issue of education. We know, we've talked a lot about the effect of education for women and girls, and what the effect it has on health. So we are educating. We've been advocating for education for the girl child to ensure that one, it's available. Secondly, that it's subsidized or free of charge, and that there are policies in place. We want to ensure that there are policies in place that encourages with the various governments. I know that a number of governments have ensured that education is free, not just for the girl child, but it's free for everyone. And with that, in some countries, they're actually quite punitive, that when they find, they will do random checks. If they find that a girl child is at home, or children who are supposed to be in school are at home, the parents are actually arrested. So sometimes I think, yes, so sometimes it does make a big difference if those policies are actually being implemented. We don't want policies to just stay on the bookshelves. We want to ensure that it's implemented. When it comes to the health, the health aspect, the issue of we've been advocating a lot for the issue of safe sex, safe sex and all issues to do with the reproductive health in schools. Even access, considering that the new face of our epidemic is the young women and girls. These are secondary school girls and tertiary level girls. We want to ensure that they have information and they have access to, to health. Reproductive health is very important for them, but also just, generally to health, in, health, whether they have an STI or that they also have the information. So you find that multiple countries have those policies in place. They call it sexuality education. They give it different names. On the flip side, when I heard Michelle talk about the effect of religion, for us it's not just religion, it's the Pentecostal religions on some of the health issues we've had. In much as countries have gone out of the way, my country is an example, gone out of the way to create policies for, sexuality education. Most of those policies are seated on the shelf because all of a sudden the church took it up as a moral issue, or you're trying to educate our children and this is immoral. Yet we want them to be empowered enough to have knowledge, and know that they can be able to access those health services earlier, or just to make better decisions for themselves. So those, we've been advocating for that and ensuring that we are not just talking about it, we're actually helping governments to implement it where possible. We'll go out of our way to push that there are condoms available for young women and girls in schools. That needs to be available, because we can't bury our head in the sand and say these young people are not having sex.
No.
They are having sex. So the advocacy and ensuring that, these items sit on the policy agenda is very key, and it's one of the things we've been doing in terms of holding governments accountable.
Okay. Madam Prime Minister, both of you talked about your the very young populations in where you folks where you're doing the work. We have a question that says, how can we ensure that the agency of young girls is built, especially facing some of the challenges, whether we're talking about HIV/AIDS, early marriages, and high school dropout rates for girls that have been exacerbated by the pandemic?
It is a big issue, because in fact, girls are socialized and educated in a way that is very different from the way boys are socialized.
Mm-hmm.
In our families, girls from an early age, they have to take care of things, the daily chores, they have to help the mother. Boys are outside playing soccer from an early age. So there is a divide between the way women, as a matter of fact, mothers raise their child, whether it's a girl, or I don't know if it's the same in your country, Dr. Penny, but whether it's a girl or it's a boy, the socialization process is very different. So the issue is, how do you change that? How do you introduce issues of responsibilities? How do you introduce issues of understanding your own body, whether you're a boy or a girl? Or how do you instill the idea of respect for that body? Your body of your sister, your body of your mother, or your body of your neighbor, when it's a girl or a boy. So these ideas are being, there's been a lot of work done along those ideas, because there's been a lot of research done also, so that we can see how the education process, whether in the family or in school or out of school, are based on values or rights, or of human rights, of human dignity, and of respect of the other. And once this is really done, all the issues regarding access to health, you can start the fight if it's not there. If you don't have access to health, you can start the fight. And if girls and boys and women and men can together start the fight to have access. Yeah. But the education process has to be thought of, and the way this socialization process is taking place should be revised and introducing these values I talked about.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank both of you for your time and perspective today. And I want to ask you, kind of as we close here, about the signs for progress that both of you see as we mark International Women's Day and Women's History Month. Where are you seeing signs of progress around addressing these health disparities that give you encouragement for the work ahead? Dr. Penny, and then we'll end with you, Madam Prime Minister.
Thank you.
I think it starts right here. The fact that we are holding this conversation, in all honesty and seriousness, and we've seen that the issues are actually common across the board. This alone gives me a lot of hope that we've not forgotten the issues, the social injustices that women face, and it gives me a lot of encouragement to continue to do the things that I've been doing in that regard. So I think we should elevate this just beyond us, and continue to hold our ground. We should not stop. As Michelle said, the fight should continue. We should not stop that fight, whether it's at the political level, community level, international level. I think we really need to reinvigorate that fight, because at the end of the day, we are still left behind in so many areas. So this gives me a lot of hope, the fact that this dialogue is ongoing, and I wish that it's not just, we don't wait just for International Women's Day. I think we will build momentum if we are consistent and we are persistent. So we being able to hold these forums in different and discuss different aspects and even delve deeper. I think 1.5 hours is not enough. We should be able to delve deeper in each and every of those areas so that then we can begin to tackle them one at a time. But I do have a lot of hope. I also would have wished that we could hear more about what is going on in the US in particular, to have that perspective. But I think that gives us opportunities to hold these discussions further along the line and see what are the collaborative areas that cut across the board that we can begin to work on one at a time.
Yes.
Very well. Well done. Well said, Dr. Penny. And I want to thank you, Erin. You've been a fantastic moderator, and I see that you're used to that. So thank you so much. What I can add is that there are women's movement all over the world, and we're going to see that Monday even more so. Look at what's happened in Argentina recently, where thanks to the women's movement, they've been able to abolish abortion in a country where there is a pope.
Yes.
You see, so it's a long fight, and that needed a lot of collaboration. And I know that the Women's Rights Program at the Open Society Foundation played a big role also in supporting those movements. Now there is a big movement to support Chile's new constitution so that the quota can be respected with regard to political involvement of women. So I think the movement, the more we know about each other, the more we share our experiences. And I agree with Dr. Penny about the importance of knowing what is going on in the US, because we are in the same world, and in our country, in Haiti, we depend a lot on what goes on in the United States. So the more we know, the more we share, the more we embrace our solidarity movement and involve our diaspora, we can continue the fight. It's going to be a long fight, but thanks to this fight, there are successes.
Well, I think our whole world is better for both of you being in that fight. And we know that when women are in community, that we are powerful. And so I am so grateful that you all allowed me to facilitate this conversation and really underscore that need, just as you said, Madam Prime Minister, for solidarity, talking about how the folks who may have been so inspired by what you both were saying and want to be empowered to act now, whether that is, from a policy perspective, from helping with education or even economic resources. I think that those are all really good takeaways from here, because the conversation absolutely and the work absolutely is something that we must carry forward from this moment and from this conversation. So thank you so much again. Thank you so much for everybody for your wonderful questions and for being so attentive, even in this virtual space. And with that, We wish you a happy International Women's History Month. Take care. Stay safe, both of you, and have a great International Women's History Day.
And continue the great work that you're doing, because I watch you very often on MSNBC.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you, Dr. Penny, and thank you for your remarks.
No, nice to meet you too. I really enjoyed the conversation. Next time it needs to be longer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.